Welcome to another episode of Breaking Battlegrounds with your hosts Chuck Warren and Sam Stone. Our first guest up today, Dr. Bob McClure, President and CEO of the James Madison Institute. Dr. McClure was appointed by Governor Bush to the Florida Elections Commission and served on the State of Florida Education Strategic Planning Council, two areas where Florida is doing far better than most of this country. Dr. McClure, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I want to ask you first a political question. You know, Florida is the miracle. Florida is this great state of freedom now. It's great for the economy. People are moving there. Does any of this happen unless Jeb Bush is elected 2 decades ago?
That's a great question, and we share that story often. I would argue that it doesn't happen because Jeb was, unlike his brother George, Jeb was considered a radical. He's a policy wonk.
Right.
You know, he was the original kind of believer in limited government, free markets, government reform. So he did everything from bring Florida into the internet age. You could literally email Jeb at jeb.org and get a response from the governor of the state of Florida. He introduced school vouchers on a small level. Like you're talking probably 500 kids. He introduced Medicaid reform, a whole list of
Dr.
issues.
McClure, before I let you finish that whole list, when it comes to education, the vouchers were one thing, but the Florida Foundation for Excellence and the research that they started doing, the PR they started doing, laid the foundation for the entire nationwide charter school movement.
There's no doubt. I mean, Jeb ran and lost his first race against Lawton Childs, lost by just a few thousand votes, but he had begun to be the real leader on any kind of parental choice in school reform, the reform of public schools. And it was considered very radical way back then.
Yeah,
so Jeb
super
really kind of kicked off this conservative 30-year period here in the state of Florida and moved really Florida from a blue state, slightly blue, to a deep red state.
That's amazing. You know, I used to years ago in '96 worked on Lamar Alexander's presidential campaign. And in 2000, when George Bush got elected, I asked how he felt about it. He goes, well, I feel great, but the wrong Bush got elected president. And I'll always remember that comment. He was a big Jeb fan. All right, so tell me about the Florida property tax situation. Governor DeSantis is talking about eliminating them, reforming them. Property taxes just seem to be increasing every year. Actually, I have a good policy proposal to share with you about that later. What's going on with it? Is it reality? Will we see some type of reform in this special session? What's going on there?
Yeah, we're going to see some reform. The question is what kind of reform. So in Florida, obviously, for your viewers and your listeners, we have no state income tax. We're a very, very low tax state. We have sales tax and a number of other taxes, but very low tax state in general with no income tax. So what the local municipalities have been doing is kind of surfing the wave of property values over the last probably 10 years. You know, we've talked about this. You just mentioned it in your opening comments. Florida's got about 800 people moving here a day. Home values have increased. And what local governments are doing is not reducing spending. Surprise, surprise. They're surfing property values and allowing property taxes to rise with the values of the home. And then they say, hey, we didn't raise your taxes. That's technically true, but you didn't lower the millage rate either in Florida. And so the governor has said, enough's enough. And so what we're looking at doing is reducing property taxes here in the state. There are a lot of different ways to do that. You could do a homestead exemption where the first $500,000 of the value of a home is tax-free. You could do, a straight up, elimination of property taxes, but then you have rural counties here that would be affected and they'd have to figure out things. So the governor essentially called a special session and said, we're going to sort this out. We're going to figure this out. And something's going to be done. The question is, what will it be?
Have you thought of, or have folks there thought of, or maybe you already have, a truth in taxation law where if the government is going to be collecting more money, we have this in Arizona and some other states have done this as well. If your local government is going to be collecting more money, so they leave the tax rate the same, but because property values have gone up, more money is coming in, they actually have to send a notice that says your taxes are going up.
That is a possibility. We do not have that here in Florida. You have to send notices, but it doesn't say essentially your taxes are going up. It's much more, shall we say, buried in the details. That's a great idea. I love that. I think what the legislature could do, and the governor, they could do a number of different things that could be sorted out. Another option that we really like at the James Madison Institute is the possibility of what we call levy cap. And that's the old, what they did in Colorado, which is you cap government spending at the local level, roll it back to, I don't know, 2022, 2023, and say, you cannot spend any more than this, right? Index it to inflation, index it to population growth. So the areas that are growing rapidly could spend more money. Rural counties would be protected from outright elimination of property taxes. And yet, if you reduce local government spending to, say, 2022 or 2023, and then indexed it, taxpayers would also receive a tax cut. We think that's the simplest way to go, because otherwise, as you know, local governments will cost shift. They'll say,
Yes.
okay, you eliminated our property taxes. We're going to raise this tax. We're going to increase this fee. And you really never plug the hole in the bottom of the bucket.
We're with Dr. Robert McClure. He is the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute, one of the gold standard think tanks on the conservative side. Let me run you by the idea I was going to tell you about on this, because it's sort of a good segue. So I have come up with an idea, and actually have had Goldwater draft the legislation to do an initiative or bills that says any local tax increases or property tax increases, school bonds, whatever the case may be, that the county or city have to have 50% turnout for it to pass. So right now, the average turnout for those measures is 19 to 28%. And you simply say, if you're going to raise these taxes, because, you know, as an owner of a couple homes, property taxes, they just go up every year. It's just amazing what they've done.
Right.
So you go out and you say, look, you can still do this, and you can still go up for a vote, but you have to have 50% turnout of the voters on the voter rolls. And that way, because, you know, they just count, let's do these special elections, let's count on low turnout, union groups,
Right.
progressive groups, and just
employees. These local governments are so big.
Yeah, so big. So you
Just
have
their
employees.
employees and families.
So what do you think of an idea like that? It really makes them have to go campaign and explain themselves.
I think that's a fantastic idea, because it would require them to do the work. It would
Yes.
require them, to your point, to campaign, as you said, and explain themselves. I mean, you look at, Mamdani in New York. He wasn't elected with 50% of the vote.
No.
He was elected with, I think, less than 25% of the vote in New York City. And he didn't even get half of that. So those kinds of things, they happen in Florida as well all the time,
Right.
whether it's a special, election for the mayor, or whether it's a tax increase, or those kinds of things. And you get stuck with whatever the results are, with 18% of the voting population voting. So I think that's a fantastic idea. And that's something we may steal from you and bring to our governor here in Florida.
Yeah, let's get together. I'll come out there. I have a business in South Florida. Let's come out there and talk about it. I'd love to see this push nationwide.
Absolutely.
Great.
I think this would really limit the growth of government.
Yes.
100%. So, all right, let's go on to something very exciting right now, the SAVE Act. Can you explain to our audience what the SAVE Act is, and frankly, what can Washington learn from Florida about this?
Well, the SAVE Act essentially is pretty simple. It basically says that you require a voter ID. You need to be verified as a voter to be able to vote in federal elections. Now, obviously, the federal government can only focus on federal elections. They can't really focus on state elections. But I can tell you, here in Florida, we have, if you go back to Bush v. Gore, for example, It was a disaster, a statewide embarrassment. Fast forward to 2024, when you had the most recent presidential election here in Florida. Over the last 20 to 25 years, Florida has implemented a number of reforms. We have 2 time zones. We have about 800 to 1,000 people moving here a day. We have every demographic in the state. We have rural and urban, and we have military overseas citizens. We have retirees that have just moved here. And yet, on election night, we know who's won every single race up and down the ballot by midnight, with 23 million people. And so what Florida has done is a number of reforms. The SAVE Act focuses, again, on federal election, but it requires a voter ID and the protection of those voter rolls to ensure accuracy. We're not talking about Jim Crow 2.0. We're not talking about disenfranchising anyone. In fact, with the reforms that Florida has put in, more Hispanics voted in the last election than ever before. More African Americans voted in the last election than ever before. And if you remember, when the Major League Baseball All-Star Game was pulled out of Atlanta because Georgia implemented those reforms, and there, Joe Biden called it Jim Crow 2.0. The very next election, more African Americans, Hispanics, and women voted in that Georgia election than had ever before. So that's what we're trying to do. Make it easy to vote, hard to cheat.
It's so darn racist saying people of Hispanic origin, black, can't get ID. It's just so racist. I don't know where to start with that one.
Yeah, it's insane. Dr. McClure, we have just 1 minute left, but how important has results on election night been for faith in Florida's elections? Because we're having that battle here in Arizona, and the people who oppose this say, well, that's not the important thing. But I think it's essential. This multi-day count is a problem.
It absolutely is essential. It is essential to be able to report the results by midnight of the election. Because what happens is the day after, the media gets involved, grassroots activists get involved, spin rooms get involved, and it begins to tear away at the fabric and the confidence and the belief in elections. People want it to be easy to vote, hard to cheat. Doesn't matter which party you're in. It doesn't matter if you're an independent. And so being able to have those elections done and complete by midnight on election day
brings it home. Absolutely. Dr. McClure, we're coming back with more in just a moment. All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We're continuing on now with Dr. Bob McClure, President and CEO of the James Madison Institute. But before we do that, a word from one of our sponsors.
Folks, did you know private student loans in the United States is around $300 billion, and $45 billion of that is distressed or default? Why Refi, a proud sponsor of our show, our original sponsor, refinances that distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They don't care what your credit score is. They provide a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. So, YRefi is not a debt settlement company, and they work with each borrower individually, tailoring the loan that meets your specific financial situation. You will not be calling some faceless call center. So Sam and I recommend that you go and look into invest at yrefi.com. You can go to invest, YREFY.com, or call 877-400-9989 and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you.
Fantastic opportunity. All right, continuing on with Dr. McClure. Doctor, one of the articles that popped up as we were prepping for this interview is that Florida's election law is being challenged in court over the new ID requirements. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a typical leftist move to obscure and confuse, hopefully judges or get the right activist judge to overturn what's been put in place. I don't think it's going to work. We have a good 30-year history of state-appointed conservative judges who follow the state's constitution. But again, what we're seeing in Florida is the proof is in the results, and that is that people regardless of the demographic, are coming out to vote. And percentages of total as a total population, but also percentages of various demographics have all increased since these reforms were put in place. And to your point earlier, the left likes to say, well, it's racist to get a voter ID, but they also want to say that, women and African Americans and Hispanics can be president, can do anything they want. They're just being held back by society. Well, which is it? Are they brilliant and smart, like, as we know, most Americans are, regardless of their demographic? Or are they not smart enough to get a voter ID? So that just shows you what it is that the left is trying to do. And again, we're a few years ahead of you guys on this issue, and hopefully you'll have something on the ballot that is credible. But the left never sleeps, and they're not sleeping here in Florida.
By the way, as a president of a think tank, does it frustrate you how much the left donors are all in 365, 24/7, and our donors are just pokey?
It's funny you say that. Many of you probably remember, you guys probably know John Stossel. And many of us know him for being the libertarian conservative that he is. He used to be on 2020 when I was young. You guys are much younger than me, so you probably don't remember that. But John Stossel had a great line. He said, you got to understand, the left wakes up every day. This is their religion.
Yes.
And they wake up every day ready to fight. They break the bottle and they walk down the dark alley and they're ready to go. He said conservatives and libertarians, they want to be left alone. They want to live their lives. They want to live their lives without government interference, with their families, with their friends, to make the choices that they are honestly responsible for. So it's hard to corral people who want to be left alone. It is, it's a interesting contradiction. Whereas those on the left who like to be led, who like their marching orders, wake up every day and attack. And that is the conundrum for us on the right and conservatives. Look at the redistricting fight. Republicans are terrible at politics. The Democrats are winning that fight currently. Now, it remains to be seen what happens totally across the country. But the left loves to wake up and fight every day. Conservatives, they want to be left alone.
100%. In one of the areas we tend to like to be left alone is in education. Conservatives prefer school choice and the opportunity to send our kids to as many different, whatever school is going to be best for them. Right now, and I know because the James Madison Institute has worked on this quite a bit, Arizona is facing a real fight. We have been one of the leaders, along with Florida, in terms of school choice, charter schools, and now vouchers, ESAs, we call them. The unions have put a bill on are putting a bill on the ballot this fall, basically to undo that.
Right.
What have these educational opportunities meant for students? Because everything that's talked about in this is about money at the adult level. There is zero discussion I've heard anywhere along the way to getting here about the kids coming from the left.
Isn't it interesting that the left always prefers to protect the adults who run the system rather than the kids who are in the system? It's always that way. And I think that what you're seeing in Arizona, based on my reading of it, you all would know better than me, is that essentially the union is trying to confuse and obfuscate on the issue and kneecap this program that is wildly popular and has been from the beginning. It's the same thing in Florida. It's the same thing in Washington, D.C. with their limited school choice program. Wherever parents have more choice and more opportunity, it is always wildly popular. So for the union to somehow say that, this is protecting public schools or this is going to fix, education, well, they're wrong. Here in Florida, graduation rates are through the roof. Third grade reading scores, which are a tremendous measure of success, are incredibly high. In some cases, minority reading scores at the third grade level in Florida are higher than the total population of other states. That's unheard of. And what you're seeing is, in addition to that, parents becoming education entrepreneurs. We all have different children. They all have different strengths and weaknesses. So why would we have a one-size-fits-all public school education system? And if you're poor, God forbid, or you're in an underserved community, why would you be stuck in a school only in your zip code? It's criminal to do that.
Well, especially, it gives you no out to push back against these schools. And this is one of the things we've seen. We have about a minute left here, but these without competition, public schools continue to funnel more money to the adults, less money to the classroom, and the quality of education continues to decline.
That's absolutely correct. Funding is not irrelevant to success in education, but it is a very poor indicator of success in education. We can look at Chicago and New York City and talk about funding. So you're absolutely right. What we're seeing is that when parents have choice, when competition is introduced into the educational system, most public schools actually get better. They don't get worse. And they have to budget. They have to tighten their belt. If you leave public education unchecked, then what happens is, to your point, you see a rise in the administration, central planning, and the bureaucracy, and the money begins to be sucked into those areas to the adults, to your point, in the system. And the children are the ones who suffer.
Absolutely. Dr. McClure, thank you so much for joining us today. We very much appreciate you having you back on the program. Folks, follow him on X at Dr. Bob McClure. And stay tuned, because next up we have Congressman Andy Biggs. He's running for governor here in Arizona. Breaking Battlegrounds coming right back. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest up today, we are very pleased to have in studio Congressman Andy Biggs. He is running for governor of Arizona. Easy front runner at the moment in that race, looking pretty good. Congressman, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So when you're out visiting the folks, what is the most common question you're asked? What are people most concerned about?
They always ask me when someone's going to be held accountable. That's like every time. When is someone going away in handcuffs?
So they must love this SPLC indictment.
I haven't had a chance to talk to too many so far, but
I love
I
it.
think I love it. And
Yeah.
look, when you think SPLC, go back 25 years, and it was reported 25 years ago that they had some shenanigans going on. But it was more than just shenanigans and bluster on their snail mail fundraising.
Right.
Turns out they were hiring people to actually foment the violence that they could in turn decry and say we're fighting to make money. How cynical is that?
Well, it is, in a certain way, it's sort of Juicy Smollett writ large, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, the appetite for racism on the left has exceeded the demand for decades now.
That's a great way of putting it. I mean, remember this, that the KKK, which is ostensibly what they were fighting, it had largely been managed and totally set to the side of society. Nobody would ever admit that they were KKK.
No.
Unless you were a Democrat in Congress, like Charlie
Yeah.
Byrd. But other than that, you just didn't hear it. And so by 25 years ago, when the first inkling that SPLC was corrupt was, KKK was down to fewer than 2,000 known members. Fewer than 2,000 members. And they were totally irrelevant to society. You didn't see marches. You didn't see any of cross burning. You didn't see that.
Every few years, a couple dozen of them would walk through Pocatello, Idaho, and that'd be that.
Yeah, or the suburb of Chicago that used to get
Right,
that, right?
right.
So, I mean, that was it. But they were done. They were unplugged. But this, when you look at it, it could be even worse than we're thinking. Where this was done, they were fomenting this solely for economic purposes.
Well, so their assets increased 420% since Charlottesville.
Exactly.
And in Charlottesville. And my question for you is, why would an organization like that have to have their assets overseas? I mean, they're a nonprofit, right? They're not being taxed, so why would they put assets overseas?
Well, first of all, Charlottesville, remember that they were paying people in Charlottesville to foment violence.
Exactly.
And the lady was killed, right? So there's blood on their hands to boot. But then when you start looking at it, what you really say is, if you look at the indictment, they have all kinds of fake companies that they're running money through. And the known assets in their 990 form is just under $800 million. And the salaries that they were paying, I mean, you start listing out salaries, $500,000 for this person, $250 for this person, and there's a bunch of them about $250. And that just gets back to why they were doing this. It was not because they wanted to create this blended society. What they wanted to do was foment disruption to make money.
You and I have found out, and Sam has made this comment before, certain organizations start out with good intentions. And I think the Southern Poverty Law Center early had some good things done. They were instrumental in some things. But it seems like as they grow like government agencies, they have to keep giving themselves a reason to be around.
Yeah, that's right. Justify your existence, and that's what they were doing. But they were grifters.
Yes.
Never forget that they were grifting on this in the most cynical way. But you're right. It's like government. I mean, I'll just give you a quick example. I was trying to actually eliminate ethanol in engines.
It tears engines
tears
apart.
Engines
it's
apart.
terrible.
Causes gas to go up. Causes, by the way, feed for your cattle to go up. It's a really expensive thing.
And the emissions from it are worse from the environment than gasoline.
Yes, exactly. So it's a congeries of bad ideas and bad outcomes. So I introduced a bill to stop that.
And all hell broke loose.
Yeah, the chairman says, "Hey, that's a good idea, Andy. I'll be with you." And so I do it, and every Democrat votes against it, and all but like 3 Republicans voted against it. And I'm like, I had no idea that so many states grew corn because that's what it was all about. It was just about corn,
Right.
It was not about doing what was right for policy or for the country.
Well, but I keep also hearing there's a hunger crisis throughout the world. We couldn't sell our corn for other things besides ethanol.
Well, you can actually make other crops. I mean, the monoculture farming of mass corn, it has its own environmental problems. Ethanol is a disaster from top to bottom.
Yes, and by the way, the corn growers have got. We're talking about E15. You got a number of Midwest farm states that want us to mandate E15 year round.
No, thank you.
Across the country, and that's
Breaking Battlegrounds. Coming back with more with Representative Andy Biggs here in just a moment. All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with yours, Chuck Warren and Sam Stone. Folks, if you're not already downloading our podcast segment, you want to do that. Make sure you're signed up and subscribed. We have Mollie Hemingway on today. Absolutely fantastic with her new book about Samuel Alito. You don't want to miss that. But right now in studio with us here, Congressman Andy Biggs. He is running for governor of Arizona, looking very good in that race right now. Follow him on X at AndyBiggs4AZ. That's the campaign account. Or if you want to follow his official account from Congress, it's at Rep. AndyBiggsAZ.
So, problem in politics now, everybody's so angry all the time. And I don't think they realize that people running for office are human beings.
Yeah.
So tell our audience, who is Andy Biggs? What's his family? How did you get involved in politics? I know you're in the state legislature, so you know how states work. But tell us about Andy Biggs.
Well, so I'm a native of this great state, born and raised in Tucson, and met my wife in Tucson oddly enough at a political event. It was a blind date, and so we got married. When we got married, you guys, I told her I never want to be involved in politics. It's too ugly.
That's when it was a gentleman's sport too.
Yeah. But it didn't work out well for me and so that's kind of the way it is. And so went to BYU undergrad and U of A law, ASU for a master's degree. Did almost all of my coursework for a PhD at ASU, and that's another sad story we can get into sometime. But that's better left when we have a box of Kleenex.
So see, I will guarantee you right now, 95% of the people, including Republicans, did not know you have a law degree, an MBA, and so forth. I mean, and
it's not it's a master's.
a master's
In international relations.
But I will guarantee you, people don't know that.
I guarantee it too. I think you're right.
But I think it's interesting that you've dedicated that much time to study.
Yeah, and like I say, when you do the masters, that takes time, and then work doing the coursework for a PhD that you never quite get to finish. That takes a long time too.
So, we have people here in Arizona who are working and going to school. So you understand what it takes to sacrifice. Did your better half ever say, "Are we ever going to finish with school?" I mean, what's going on here?
Well, no. So our story is pretty simple. Well, we did it kind of backwards. Most kids going up to BYU, they go up there and they meet somebody and then they get married. We met each other and went up to BYU and went to school, got married, and then went up to school. And so I worked my tail off. I was working plus taking as many credit hours as you can to get through. And Cindy was working, and then we get through there, and then we go down to Tucson for law school. And I worked the whole time. They say, "Don't work your first year." We had to work. I had to work.
Yeah. Did you have kids then?
We had our first child while we were in law school. Yeah.
So what were the jobs you did when you were at BYU or law school?
So when I was at BYU, I was a waiter at so on campus. They had a lot of events on campus, and what are you laughing about?
I'm laughing because I'm just imagining a probo how bad the tips were. But continue.
Oh yeah, we didn't get tips because we were catering.
The banquet,
the banquet thing. So and it's just amazing how big those banquets were, and how unappreciative the people that were waiting for an hour and a half for us to get them their food they could be. They could be nasty, and and then once they tasted the food, they said, "Oh, thank you for keeping it so long." But we, so that's what we did. And then in law school, it was just, picking up wherever I could pick up a job, either doing a law clerking one-off or work. I helped in a law library for a while, and that type of thing, and
saved every penny you could.
Yeah, I mean, we look back on it and we kind of laugh at how little we made. And the year we had our son, our oldest son, we made nothing. We made nothing. And
you remember what your tax return was that year?
Yes, and I'm not saying it was really, really small. Let's just put it that way. And we back then the most you could get on a student loan was $5,000 a year. Right? If you remember this, right? Because they weren't federally insured, right? They were private loans. So and it was kind of limited to that, $5K. And but then tuition was a lot smaller. I still don't know why law school tuition costs so stinking much, because it's.
Well, I was telling friends the other day, I mean, I paid my way through school. I don't think people can do it today.
Well,
it's awfully difficult.
Well, one of the problems that we have with universities' tuition is the fact that when you have federally insured student loans, now you have money's
there's
not
no
scarcity.
cap.
Yeah, there's no scarcity anymore. It's just this massive amount of abundance, and so they'll raise the tuition as far as they think that they can. And you remember in 2008 when we had a big downturn, the only place in America where there was construction going on, and certainly in Arizona, was at the university campuses.
Right.
Because there was endless supplies of money, and that's why they raised their tuition, and that should stop. They should stop. There should be no federally insured loans there.
Well, and one of the other things, this happened kind of right through the era when I was going to school, is you saw them become more than just educational institutions, where it became, it became a day camp and a daycare, and all of a sudden you have concerts paid for by the school. You have these huge entertainments and entertainment facilities, and all these things that have nothing to do with the actual educational attainment. And those costs come with massive administrative costs. So they're ballooning it in ways that aren't benefiting students past their time on campus.
Right. I mean, that'd be real interesting, Sam, if you looked at it and said, how much do you spend on administrative costs that have nothing to do with somebody getting a degree in, well, something meaningful anyway.
Right.
It's really difficult to see the utility with a lot of what they do. in other words, there's a lot of fat that should be cut. And it's not just in Arizona State University. This is broad across the fruited plains.
I don't believe there is a state that has this in its sights and under control right now.
No, I don't know of one. And so the fight is, you get these students come out, they graduate, they've got massive amounts of student debt, which is what Democrats are saying. Well, let's just forgive it. Let's just forgive that debt. Well, we're talking. That is a bubble that is supposed to be $800 billion to $1 trillion. So if you forgive that, you got a big problem.
It's $1.7 trillion, and it goes against our national debt.
Right. That's right.
Everybody forgets. It's a national debt problem.
That's right.
Yeah, 100%. This whole thing has gotten so out of control with the spending costs. Why do we not make universities back their loans, where they have to actually care about ROI, where if the student defaults on it, the university's on the hook too?
My goodness, I can't believe you even suggested something as outlandish as holding someone accountable for what they're doing. That's amazing. Yeah, no, it's not a bad idea. I think I've heard other people say the same thing. It's just so difficult in D.C. to get the political will to do that. That's the problem. I mean, because I think it's a good idea, and I would hope that we could do something like that. Maybe we can do something like that in the state.
So, let me ask you this. So you were in the state senate president, right?
Right.
Okay. What did that experience in being in Congress, what are the lessons you will take and apply to being governor of Arizona?
Well, first of all is that I've seen the budgets, both state and federal. I actually wrote budgets in the state. And I think that is important because not only – so we have a $2 trillion structural deficit at the federal level. About half of that, it looks like is fraud, waste, and abuse. And in Arizona, the estimate is $10 billion a year in fraud, waste, and abuse. And just to put that in perspective, the general fund budget from the legislature is $17 billion, roughly. So over half of that, of the total, probably total spend, which includes federal dollars, is potentially fraud, waste, and abuse. And that means that if you could winnow that down, even by 50% or
a third,
20%. Think of the savings that you would actually have, and ability to do things that we need to. Like you need water infrastructure has to be built, road infrastructure has to be built. You could.
Well, so Congressman, this is the question that's baffled me, and there is more, I think, more interaction between Republicans and Democrats in Washington than people realize. People are still people. You still talk to each other and have conversations. This is the point I made to Democrats, and I don't understand. Maybe you can give me some insight why they don't get this. If you cut this fraud, waste, and abuse, you don't have to just give it all back to taxpayers. I'd like that, but you could actually spend it on some of the programs they want to, that are actually effective. So why allow this?
Yeah, and I don't get that, but I would suggest that this is what it is. It's kind of related to the NGO money laundering crisis you have. And that is, that money will filter itself back into partisan coffers. We're not getting it on our side, but they're getting it on their side. And so I think, money is the milk of politics, right? I mean, it really drives it, and I think that drives the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Why should Katie Hobbs be replaced?
Well, I mean, the bottom line for her is everything's unaffordable housing. Let's talk housing for a second. Okay. So she's put moratoriums on housing, moratorium on actually water management and land management. And what that does is that erodes the notion of the American dream, which, by the way, the student loan debt that people come out with, that also erodes that. But anyway, she puts these moratoriums out there. She just lost in court over that. So not only was she causing our housing prices to go up, she was doing it unlawfully, and people suggested to her from day one, this is unlawful. You can't do that. And I think that if we want to make Arizona great, really great, because I think it can be just this incredibly economically prosperous, educationally prosperous. It's a great place. We love living here. but it can be so much better if you actually manage the resources that we have.
So one of the issues with Hobbs has been she just vetoes everything, right?
Yeah. Got to have a hobby.
You could, obviously right now it's not the case, but you could walk into that governor's mansion. Not really a mansion here in Arizona, but the governor's office.
We don't have one.
But you could walk into the governor's office and find yourself dealing with a Democrat-led state legislature. How would you find a way to work with them where Katie Hobbs has failed?
Well, first of all, Sam, don't curse me that way. I believe we're going to have a Republican legislature.
I believe so too, but
here's the thing, and I know that the legislature's turned over dramatically, but when I was the Senate president, it wasn't as conservative as I am. I am really conservative. I'm a hardcore conservative, but you have to work with people, and you have to find out what you can do to move your policies forward, and that's what I have to do in Congress. I like Ron Wyden. This guy is a super lefty from Oregon. We're working together, trying to help reform Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, for instance. You find the places that you agree on, you work together on that, try to get it done.
And then those build the opportunity for further advancement, right?
That's exactly right.
Absolutely. Andy Biggs, anything else? The last message, we have just 1 minute left. Last message for the voters of Arizona. You've got a tough primary race you're doing great in right now, potentially, obviously, a very tough governor's race. Why should they be voting for you at the end of this?
Yeah, when all is said and done, Arizona is a center-right state. There's a lot that we agree on, even if you're an independent voter, even soft Democrats. You can't imagine how we can fix the affordability issue in Arizona, but you can't get there with this current governor, but you can get there with me. And that's we all are concerned about affordability. We're concerned about water, and I'm leading the charge in Congress about water, too.
This was one of the most affordable states in the country under a Republican governor. In just 3 years now of a Democrat governor, we have gone to the 7th least affordable state in the country. That's crazy.
It is crazy, and that is not by the way, that isn't all a measure of the national environment weighing down on you. That's policy decisions made by this governor.
100%. Andy Biggs, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, make sure you're downloading that podcast segment. We've got great content on there today, as always. You don't want to miss Mollie Hemingway with her new book about Samuel Alito. And we have Bee's Corner, always a fan favorite, plus Gary Gigi coming on to give you some financial advice. So download that stuff. We'll talk to you next week. All right, welcome to the podcast portion of Breaking Battlegrounds. Chuck had to bail out of the studio. He had to dash, but we've still got Bee in here, so stay tuned because Bee's Corner is going to wrap us up today. And you don't want to miss our final interview of the day, Mollie Hemingway. That's coming up here in a few minutes. She has a fantastic new book out about Justice Alito. You definitely want to catch that. B, I know we are going to be putting this out, and we're giving away 5 copies of that book, so be sure, if you're checking out that interview, get on our X, get on the DMs, and get yourself that free copy of that book. But before we get into that, talking a little bit of economics, a little bit of investing with our friend Gary Gigi. Gary is the president and CEO of Gigi Capital. You can find him on X at Gary Gigi or at gigicapital.com. That's GYGI capital.com. Gary, thank you so much for joining us once again. Welcome back to the program.
Happy to be here, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Now, I was just reading an article on the Wall Street Journal, Gary, that it says America's in the middle of a stealth manufacturing boom. I don't think most people have any idea that that's occurring, or maybe it isn't occurring. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, so if you listen to the media or Democratic politicians a lot, they talk about how manufacturing jobs have not increased over the last year. In fact, they've gone down. That's actually true. But what they're not including in that conversation is that productivity, meaning how productive we are as manufacturers, has gone up. Now, some of that has to do with AI, and that's super important, Sam, in terms of like where we go with this. But the article, I read that as well. It's written by Greg Ip, who I wouldn't call him a Trump fan, but he's an honest journalist. And so he brings up some really good points. Manufacturing jobs dropped by 100,000 over the last year, but production, super important again, it's up 2.3%, and manufacturing shipments is up 4.2%. So you add those things into the conversation, and I think you see what he's talking about, which is there's a stealth manufacturing boom which is taking place. Thing that America does, there is demand for a product, then manufacturers in America ramp up and they meet that demand. And so so that is important if you are a manufacturer. And going forward, there are certain industries that probably are going to do really well under this area. And so manufacturing of furniture, probably not one of those. And so that's something that gets manufactured overseas at a lower labor cost. But there's a lot of industries that are around these data centers that are springing up in order to make AI work. And all of those are going to be very involved and productive in terms of making those data centers up and running.
Does the current situation with Iran, the world price of oil, but inflate? Pardon me, I'm kind of struggling around a concept here, and maybe you can help me refine it a little bit. But inflation.
Sure.
Is relative to a certain extent, right? So that while our energy prices here have gone up in the United States, they're going up much more in other parts of the world. Energy prices for fuel in China, Europe, Australia, all those other places have gone up even more dramatically. Is that actually long-term creating a structural advantage for the United States?
I believe it is, and because this um, energy, oil exploration, it can be changing and maybe permanently. So let's just talk about this in terms of the Strait of Hormuz and the energy that has flown through there historically has created about a 5% increase on oil, therefore gasoline, because of Iran always threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if that gets resolved, then energy is going to come down by the mere fact that Iran is not threatening the Strait of Hormuz. However, in the meantime, and President Trump has talked about, a lot of oil tankers are heading towards the U.S. Gulf of America in order to fill up and then move back to their final destination, which means that the U.S. is becoming an oil, let's just call it an energy exporter, because it also includes liquefied natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the U.S. is exporting oil and also liquefied natural gas around the world, that makes us an extremely strong country in terms of our position as it relates to energy. And that's why, yes, you're correct. The price of oil, therefore the price of gas has gone up since the war started. But Europe, Asia, lots of other places, it's gone up much more. Particularly jet fuel has gone up a lot. And I think that is hurting countries around the world. U.S. is in a stronger position. One of the things that may help us, Sam, is that we're not particularly strong as it relates to heavy sour crude. That's what's processed into jet fuel and sometimes diesel. And we're getting that now from Venezuela because they were heavy sour. The U.S. is heavy in what's called light sweet crude.
Mm-hmm.
So if we get a lot of heavy sour oil from Venezuela, we're able to process that into jet fuel, but also diesel. Then that puts us in an even stronger position in terms of not just gas as we use it, but diesel and jet fuel around the world. So we're in an enviable position as it relates to energy around the world. So I'm bullish about that. In the short term, um, it all relates to how quickly the Strait of Hormuz gets opened up. And so if it does get opened up satisfactorily, I think the price of oil and gas comes down. If the prices stay elevated, as Secretary of Energy alluded to, then we may see higher inflation as it relates to that, because energy goes into so many products that are manufactured. And so if you have higher oil prices, therefore higher gas prices, you may see higher inflation over the next year. And that's something that the administration is going to have to deal with and deal adequately with.
You referred to all those oil tankers lining up to come into the Gulf of America and to our southern ports to load up on oil. A lot of those then transiting all the way, literally halfway around the world, to Asian markets.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that the federal government should consider stepping in and maybe stepping on California's toes? Because realistically, it's the lack of refining capacity and the lack of port, oil port and gas port capacity in California that's causing that would be far cheaper if we had those resources once again, which we used to. 20 years ago, we had that.
Yeah, I think that's starting to be in the works. I have noticed that Secretary Wright, who's the Secretary of Energy, is pressuring the opening of a refiner that's been closed for about 20 years, if he's successful in doing so, and it looks like he will be. And if that happens, and if you see a more reasonable governor elected in the fall, right now the two Republican candidates are in first and second place. So if you see a more Republican or reasonable governor, I think you could see a lot of refining take place in California, Sam, and that would be an awesome addition to our energy output.
100%. All right, one last topic before we let you go here today, because this affects a lot of the small business owners. We know we have a lot of small business owners who listen to our program here. What we know and don't know about the tariff refund process. What is going on there?
Yeah, so some of it is clear, some of it is unclear. But starting this week on Monday, then people that paid the tariffs as they were coming in, and the government's not referring to consumers that purchased product that was higher in price due to a tariff, but they're talking about the importers who actually paid the tariff. They can start applying for refunds on those tariffs as early as this week. They're approved over about 90 days, and then refunded, it looks like, within about a year. So it's not something that you flip a switch and you're going to get your refund immediately, but it looks like that is in the works. And so people who paid those tariffs should start seeing confirmation of a refund and then payment of those refunds sometime within the next 9 months, I'm guessing.
Fantastic. Gary, how do people get a hold of you? Because obviously, folks, if you're listening to this, the reason we love having Gary come on this program and the reason he's so generous with his time is because he's also able to reach out and help a lot of folks meet their needs, meet and achieve their dreams for themselves and their family, their financial futures, securing all of that. Gary, how do folks get in touch with you so they can work with you? Because there's not many people we talk to who have the acumen and the broad knowledge that you always bring, talking about economics and the markets and various opportunities that are out there.
Well, first of all, Sam, thank you for the kind words. I do appreciate this. I have been doing this for a very long time. And if someone wants to reach out to us, there's several ways of doing it. You can call us at 801-787-0342. That's 801-787-0342. Or go to our website and request an appointment, and that's gygicapital.com, GYGI Capital, CAPITAL.com.
Fantastic, Gary. Thank you so much. As always, we love having you. Look forward to talking with you next week. Folks, stay tuned. We have Mollie Hemingway coming up with her new book. You don't want to miss that. And if you hop on our X DMs right now, we are the first 5 people that DM us for a copy of Mollie's book. We'll get a free copy courtesy of Breaking Battlegrounds, so you don't want to miss that. And then stay tuned. Our final segment, it's exploding in popularity already. Bee's Corner. We settled on an actual name. That's coming up as well. So stay tuned for all of that. Breaking Battlegrounds back in just a moment.
All right, Rudy, how you doing?
Remember your dreams, your future, your education? Has private student loan debt destroyed those dreams? It doesn't have to. Why Refi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars, get you custom payments that you can afford, and they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call Y Refi today.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our final guest up today, Mollie Hemingway, editor-in-chief of The Federalist, senior journalism fellow at Hillsdale College, Fox News contributor, and a best-selling author. She has an amazing new book out. I'm going to admit, I have not yet read it. Chuck is well into it. He grabbed it just the last night, I think, and he says it's riveting. You can't put it down. Mollie Hemingway, the author of The Justice Who Reshaped the Supreme Court and Restored the Constitution, talking, of course, about Samuel Alito. Mollie Hemingway, welcome back to the program.
It's great to be here with you.
So, two questions. First of all, what is the significance of Justice Alito on the court? And the second thing is, as you wrote this book, what surprised you?
Well, I'd previously written a book with Carrie Severino on Justice Kavanaugh, and I really enjoyed writing about the Supreme Court. When we did that book, we were talking to a bunch of people, including justices, and one of the things that we kept hearing from people was, why does nobody talk about Alito? He's this giant on the court, and nobody knows anything about him. And I realized there has never really been anything written about this guy, even though he's been on authoring or part of all of the important decisions of recent years, not least of which is the landmark decision Dobbs, which overturned Roe v. Wade, which had been a goal of the conservative legal movement for literally 50 years. And people don't know about him. They don't know about how he differs from some of his colleagues and how he's able to keep coalitions together to accomplish these really difficult tasks like that one. And so I just wanted to be able to write about it, tell his story, get a little bit into how he is the way he is. And I forgot the second question.
What surprised you when you wrote the book? I mean, when we research something always surprises us. What surprised you?
Oh, yeah. I love that part when you're researching something and you're like, oh, this blows me away.
Right.
I would say, I didn't really know that much about him when I started. So learning that even though he's very quiet and very reserved, that he has this absolutely wicked, dry sense of humor, and that all the people close to him, have stories about various jokes he's told or various pranks he's pulled. And that's not something a lot of people know. But what surprised me the most was definitely learning about what happened after the Dobbs leak inside the court. So we all know that there were protests outside the court and at the justices' homes, but they were very serious things that were going on at these justices' homes. They had to wear bulletproof vests. They had to be moved to secure locations. They had to face down actual attempted assassins, which we know about, and the threats have been ongoing for a long time. But after the leak, knowing that they were in a very bad situation until the time that the Dobbs decision was released, because a decision isn't final until it's publicly announced. And if someone is killed or dies in the meantime, that means they would have lost the majority on that.
Okay.
They asked their colleagues to please, get their dissent done. They'd had a ton of time to do it. And instead, the liberal colleagues intentionally slow walked the dissent until the very, very end of the Supreme Court term, even as literally Justice Kavanaugh is having someone trying to kill him and his family.
Thus endangering their lives and their families' lives because they were so angry about this decision. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Now, one other thing about it, I heard you on a podcast. You said there's a grading system on these cases, like an A, B, and C. And would you explain that to our audience and how this related to the Dobbs case, which makes what the opposition did even worse, as far as I'm concerned?
So the justices meet in conference, which means just the 9 justices, nobody else, no staff, and they discuss business of the court. At that time, they also find out, what cases are about to be turned out and which ones aren't. And they're given a grade by the Chief Justice of A, B, or C. A means ready to go. B means we're just wrapping up a final few things. So let's say someone writes the majority opinion and then someone writes the dissent, and then the people who write the majority opinion need to respond to the dissent. It can take a little bit of extra time. C is nowhere near completion. We haven't even gotten the dissent. So they were shocked to find out that it was given a C. Think about it. Everyone knew the arguments for and against overturning Roe. They'd
Right.
known them for like 50 years. They knew they were taking this case for more than a year. They'd heard oral arguments in December. They'd hired clerks precisely to work on this issue. They knew that, their clerks should be hired with this type of expertise. And the majority opinion had come out without a powerful majority opinion had come out to and was distributed internally by early February. That they were nowhere near being done was already shocking. But then when they were asked specifically by some of the justices to please go ahead and get the thing done that they needed to get done, they went out of their way not to do it. Justice Kagan reportedly, according to my sources, went to Justice Breyer's chambers and screamed at him to not accommodate the conservative justices. And then they included, once they wrote their dissent, they included that footnote, totally unnecessary, to a case that really was still being worked on, knowing that it wouldn't come out for several more weeks. So the Dobbs decision didn't come out until until June 24th or something like that. It was crazy.
We're with Mollie Hemingway. She is the author of Alito, the justice who reshaped the Supreme Court and restored the Constitution. My last question, then I'm turning it over to Sam. Where was Merrick Garland during all this? Why did they allow this to happen and the threats these justices received? It just seems like Biden and Merrick Garland didn't care.
I think they, rather than didn't care, I think they liked what was going on. There are laws on the books against threatening a federal judge in order to change the outcome of a case. Anybody protesting at the private home of the family of the justice is threatening them with an intent to get them to change their decision on a case. And everyone knew what the decision was. I mean, it was so cut and dry that action should have been taken and that these justices should and their families should have had their lives protected. It just wasn't close. And yet Merrick Garland said, oh, well, if the marshals want to do something, they can, or if people want to, we're not stopping anybody from doing anything. Neither were they coming out and saying, this is unacceptable. The White House, in fact, came out and said, we understand that these are all peaceful protests and we want those, to continue. It's just, even when someone tried to kill Justice Kavanaugh and his family, the reaction from the media and other Democrat leaders was completely muted. And it's hard to see what they were doing there.
We're talking with Mollie Hemingway. She has a new book out that you definitely need to check out, folks. It's called Alito, the Justice Who Reshaped the Supreme Court and Restored the Constitution. Available at Amazon and at hatchetbookgroup.com. Mollie, the gamesmanship you were talking about earlier with the justices delaying the ruling, releasing it contrary to standing rules and law, does this have any precedent in history? Has this type of thing happened within the court before?
I don't think so, but I don't know for sure. I do find it interesting that just last week we had another report that the justices were intentionally delaying a case from the October setting. That's the very first month that the Supreme Court hears cases each year. And that there was a report that they are slow walking the racial gerrymandering case, their dissent in that, because they think that it will help Republicans and hurt Democrats. So we're now starting to see a pattern. The liberal justices are not dealing well with the fact that they're not in power. This is something that conservatives have had to deal with for decades, and they did it without, putting their colleagues' lives at risk or engaging in partisan games like this, but they're not doing well. They're starting to speak publicly against their colleagues, which is such a violation of a long-standing norm. They are also impugning the integrity of the court. Again, violation of a long-standing norm. What you're supposed to do on the court, you put all your mean stuff in your opinion or your dissent or your concurrence, and then you go and have drinks. But that's not what's happening now. They're being public. They're trying to get the public to help them in their attacks on the court and its integrity.
You made a great point in your book about when Ronald Reagan was president. U.S. Attorney General Edwin Meese talked about reforming the court, going back to his original standards. And then you made the point that William Brennan, in response to that, at Georgetown, called that originalism was arrogance cloaked in humility, and that he said the court should worry less about the views of the founders and more about the values of equality and individual rights. Brennan was completely transparent in his view that the court's job was to interpret the Constitution according to the evolving standards of morality. Will you explain to our audience the difference between Mises' view of originalism and Brennan's, I felt it, just the gushy-feely, how I feel theory of law, which seems to be Justice Jackson right now?
I was just thinking
left.
that she is a return to the Justice
Yes.
Brennan style, or even like a Thurgood Marshall. This idea that all that matters is how I feel. We'll let the law catch up to my feelings.
It's the question every kid has with their parents when they want to stay out later. It's how I feel, right? But explain to our audience about the difference between the two. I don't think they hear it, but they really don't understand it.
It's really about rule of law versus rule of man. Rule of man is very based on what someone feels at a moment or what they say the evolving standards of the time suggest for a given moment. Rule of law is a way of saying originalism, this idea that we are all bound by the same Constitution. And the way to understand the Constitution is not what we wish it said or what we think we could get away with saying. It says, what did they mean when they wrote the Constitution and when it was signed into being our law? Same thing with any amendment to the Constitution, also with statutes, understanding what is the meaning of a statute. Most cases before the Supreme Court are statutory decisions, 75% probably. So you also apply it to that. What does the text mean? Not, what can we get away with here? But what did it mean? And particularly, what did it mean as it was passed? These debates about the court are really at the heart of everything. For decades, really beginning with Woodrow Wilson, firming up under President FDR, but lasting for decades later because of stupid decisions made by presidents like President Eisenhower. They had a court that was just engaged in, well, we wish the people had voted for this thing that they didn't vote for, so we'll just say it's the law. Versus this other approach, which is the court is not there to be a super legislature. It's to interpret correctly what the laws of the land say and mean. And then for the first time in history, we have an originalist majority on the court. They have their differences, they have their different approaches, but you have 5 people who, by their own statements, say, we adhere to an originalist standard. We look at the Constitution, what it says and what it means, rather than what we personally feel.
Mollie, getting back to Justice Alito, and folks, if you DM us the first 5 people that send us a DM on this, we will send you a free copy of Mollie's book. So make sure you get on there and do that on our X account. Mollie, getting back to Justice Alito, it seems like he's sort of the ideological successor to Antonin Scalia, but he seems to me at least to be a better coalition builder or better at working with his peers to move them in his direction. Is that accurate, or am I kind of off base there?
Well, it's funny because Justice Scalia, to me, and Justice Thomas have a lot of similarities. They're more philosophical. They know what the law should be, and they just say it. And they don't really care if other people are with them or not. Justice Alito, who was, you might remember when he was nominated, because he was from New Jersey and because he was Italian, they called him Scalito. The two men could not be more different. Justice Scalia was this outgoing, gregarious, like witty, just loud personality and beloved by people for what the little jabs he'd get into his opinions and dissents. Alito is far and away the most reserved member of the court. He's quiet. He does not seek celebrity at all. He's very scholarly in his approach, but he's also less philosophical and more practical. He thinks about the practical implications. And to your point about building coalitions, he also thinks about, well, I might agree with Thomas over here about where we should be, but he sees his role more as the person who can get the rest of the court to go over to where Thomas is, rather than just standing with Thomas on his own. So the way I put it in the book is that Justice Thomas is like the deployed aircraft carrier of the Supreme Court, and Justice Alito's chambers are like the Green Berets. They work together, but they have different skill sets.
Does he make has he helped Thomas? It seems like Thomas has kind of come out of his shell. He's been speaking more. He's been asking more questions. He's been out in public more. Has Alito's presence sort of helped him grow that in that direction?
Well, it's interesting that I think the big change, both men really like, they don't like chaos. They like order. And so for many years, Justice Thomas just thought oral argument was kind of silly and performative. He preferred to read the briefs that had been put forward before the court and then make a decision based on those. He didn't think that half hour they give to each side where the justices ask questions was particularly great. He also didn't, he's also kind of introverted. People might not realize that. So he doesn't really like jumping in to ask a question. Many of the justices are quite the opposite. They love jumping in. They love asking questions. But when COVID happened, they went from a free-for-all in oral argument to an orderly system where the person with the most seniority gets to ask the question first. Technically, that's Chief Justice John Roberts, but usually he'll defer to the next person with the most seniority, who's Justice Thomas. For him, that's a much more comfortable situation. And so he has asked a lot of questions under the new format. And even the New York Times was like, wow, he's really good at oral argument. And the other justices pick up on what he says. But it does help. I mean, they do have a lot of friendships across the court. And I do think the friendship there between Alito and Thomas is obvious. And it's a strength for both of them.
Tell the story about when the case was in front of the court about Minnesota restricting what you can wear when you vote. And that shows a little bit about how he is good at oral argument and getting a point across.
So I think of Minnesota as what Colorado is now. It's a state that always loses before the Supreme Court when it's trying to violate people's civil liberties. But this was a few years back. Minnesota had a law that you couldn't wear political gear at the polling place. And a guy had a Tea Party shirt on and something that suggested that voter ID was a good thing. And they said he couldn't vote because of this. So the case ends up going to the Supreme Court. And Justice Alito is asking this Hennepin County, Minnesota prosecutor, or the advocate there, how this works out. He's like, can you wear a shirt with a rainbow flag? He's like, yeah, totally. Can you wear a shirt with a Parkland Strong symbol on it? That would be a place that was a victim of a gun shooting? Yes, of course. Can you wear an NRA shirt? Oh, no, not at all. He said, well, what about if you wore a shirt with the words of the Second Amendment? And he said, I don't think so. And then he goes, what about the First Amendment? Congress can't restrict speech. Everybody erupts in laughter. And it ended up being, I think John Roberts wrote the actual majority opinion in that case. First off, people did not know how that case was going to go. I think it ended up being 7-2.
Right.
And the chief used a lot of that colloquy, that exchange, in his eventual opinion.
We're with Mollie Hemingway. She is the author of Alito, the justice who reshaped the Supreme Court and restored the Constitution. She is also editor-in-chief of The Federalist, and you probably have seen her on Fox News many times. Tell me this. You made a point that he went and did an internship or clerk doing the Italian Supreme Court. And he noticed how clean Italy was versus Philadelphia and other cities. How has his Catholicism How has his Catholicism and his experience growing up in the late 60s influenced him as a judge?
So the thing I think that he learned most, this was in college. He had an advisor who studied foreign courts. And Italy had just for the first time, they were going through a lot of changes in their government, and they just set up a Supreme Court for the first time. So he encouraged Alito to go over to Italy and study it. It was the perfect senior trip, getting to be in Italy, which he hadn't been to before, but it's the land that his father came from and his grandparents came from. And he was just sitting on the streets of, I think, Rome and Bologna and just seeing how clean it was and how low the crime was. Whereas he's also witnessing what Philadelphia and Trenton and New York City are, what's happening in those cities. This is late 60s. You're starting to see a lot more crime, a lot more, just like a breakdown of civil society there. And for him, it was a reminder of how some policies can really hurt the middle classes and lower classes in America and how it doesn't need to happen. And he seems to care more deeply about that than some of his colleagues. And he also, as a former prosecutor, he just thinks like having order in a society is one of the first and chief goals of government. And it makes him, again, more practical than some of his colleagues.
Mollie, before we let you go here, we have about 5 minutes left. We wanted to talk on something, obviously, that's been hugely in the news, which is everything going on with the SPLC. Can you give folks a quick rundown on that? Because obviously I think Democrats are trying to foul the pitch as fast as they can because this is turning into a disaster for them.
I just wanted to say one last thing on Alito that I hope people take away from him. We live in a time when people seem to care only about principle or only about winning. And I think Alito is this model. And I hope the book shows this, how you can be both extremely principled and also thinking about how to secure victories for America or for the American people. And I think that's like a really important lesson to learn from his life, particularly since we know so much about Thomas and Scalia, who are also great.
Well,
but as for the Southern Poverty Law Center, a group that I have condemned for about 15 years or more, I have long known that they were an evil organization that falsely accuses its political opponents of being racist or bigoted, and they have a lot of power. They get a lot of money from major corporate donors. I mean, they literally get like $100 million a year. It's absolutely insane how much money they have to run basically Democrat Party operations. But this indictment is crazy. It says, it's laid out, assuming this is true, what is laid out in the indictment, they were not finding enough racism to raise money off of. So they started funding not members, but leaders of groups that were doing racist things. And then the leaders were organizing things like the Unite the Right rally. These people they were funding, they were giving money to them. And then they were raising money from donors to fight the racism that they were creating. They were setting up fake bank accounts to hide what they were doing. And they were, then these are things you're not allowed to do as a nonprofit group. It's not even a good idea for the FBI. The FBI usually messes this stuff up too, but at least that's a law enforcement agency. But here they were paying people, helping them put together crimes, and then lying about it to their donors, according to the indictment. And so I've long disliked them, but I was shocked at how much worse it was than I realized.
It's pretty stunning. And I mean, I remember this was like 35 years ago when I was a kid, right? I actually, for a little while, became a card-carrying member of the SPLC when they were doing the teaching tolerance thing and all of that. And as a kid, it sounded great. I got a little bit older. You started seeing some of the truth that you've been exposing for a long time. But this is on a whole different level. And the defense that Democrats are rolling out that you alluded to, that, they're just doing what any law enforcement agency does. They're not a law enforcement agency.
And also, even by the worst FBI standards, sometimes the FBI will like, we're working with some people to fight terrorism. And then as the case rolls out, you're like, you guys were the ones coming up with the terrorism.
Right, the Gretchen Whitmer thing, for example. Yes. Yeah.
But even by those standards, that's not what's happening here. They're not like paying an informant. They're paying the leaders of these groups, and they're paying them massive sums of money, millions of dollars, and then saying to people that they're trying to fight the thing that they're funding. You could just, John Roberts on Fox yesterday said it was like if a firefighting group paid an arsonist to set fires, and then they went out and raised more money to say, there are all these fires being set that we need to put out. It's such a level of corruption. It's unbelievable. And it also is kind of heartening that they had to fake the racism because there wasn't
100%. Right.
100%. Yeah, the demand for racism on the left has exceeded the supply for a couple of decades now. Mollie Hemingway, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you have a bit of a time crunch. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Folks, go to our RX account, go on the DMs. If you're one of the first 5 people in there, we will give you a copy of her new book, Alito, the Justice Who Reshaped the Supreme Court and Restored the Constitution. You can get that on Amazon or Hatchet Book Group. And follow Mollie on X at MZ Hemingway and obviously at The Federalist. Mollie Hemingway, thank you so much once again. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You know what's interesting about that, Sam? I Googled last night what the Supreme Court's opinion approval rating was in 2016. 60%. Today it's 39. And that's all because the left has made a concentrated effort to
tear it down. Yeah. Now, look, this is where, and we've talked about this a little bit on the program, but with the filibuster in the Senate, it's very clear if Democrats get control of all three branches that they will expand the Supreme Court. They will pack it. They will try to limit its, reach in terms of
Republicans really should get rid of
Constitution.
the filibuster and pass a law that
They
says
just
you
need to-
can't stack the court.
Right.
You can't do this without X, and they should just do it now.
No, you should do all of it now.
Yep.
You should do all of it now, because I think, look, folks, you heard yesterday, Chuck. You probably saw this. Trump administration essentially admitting that gas prices may stay this high or higher for another year.
Yeah.
Well past the
Yeah.
midterms.
Yeah.
Republicans are likely to take a bloodbath.
Oh, 100%.
In these midterms, right?
Yeah, 100%.
There's at least a chance we can hold the Senate.
Yeah.
But what that means is you're now down to 7 months.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, look, I have held back on this, but they're going to do it when they get it. And it's time to make those changes, and it's time to codify saying you need to do this with the Supreme Court and blah, blah, blah.
It's time to codify 9 justices and do everything else. I mean, really just go whole hog right now.
Yeah. Folks, this is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back.
All right, welcome to today's final segment of Breaking Battlegrounds, a newly evolving show favorite. We have Bee's Corner,
Hello.
our new true crime feature.
Welcome. How we doing?
What do we got today, Bee?
So today, this is a story that happened back in 2022 in Green Bay, Wisconsin. 24-year-old Taylor Shabiznis was charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault. But the story started...
He was doing a lot of shabusiness.
Oh, yep. She was doing a lot.
She was doing a lot of shabusiness. Wow.
This is one of those stories where, when they call somebody a crazy girlfriend, she's the crazy girlfriend.
Okay, that's maybe a little further than the crazy girlfriends I've dealt with, but okay.
Yeah, this is. So it started at around 3:25 a.m. when the victim's mother heard a door slam and went downstairs to find her son's head in a bucket. Yeah, she called the police. The person who was last with the victim was Taylor, so they ended up finding her on the east side of town with the rest of the body parts in her car. In a crock pot box, his legs were.
What?
And,
Wait.
Yeah. And then, so...
Okay, that has to be a very large crock pot, right? Or had they
I'm thinking at least like 15 quarts.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so then...
He's a very small guy.
That...
Kind of both, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So that, and then the rest of his body, she went into the basement of the home when it happened because they did meth before the whole murder incident. And
Oh, I'm shocked.
yeah, they got into some sexual relations, and included some chains, and one thing led to another. And she said she enjoyed choking him very much, and she didn't plan on killing him, but the chains they did it. They kept her going, and she just killed him. And then she decided to dismember him with a bread knife, which she told the police that the bread knife was the easiest thing to dismember him with.
A bread knife.
Yeah. And then she told the police that they're going to have fun finding him, like a little scavenger hunt. So she's a little bit crazy.
Now, do we know if this woman had a history of violence before
Oh,
this?
yeah. She had a rap sheet longer than a CVS receipt.
Like, this
And she
wasn't
even
out of
had an
nowhere.
ankle monitor. Yeah, she had an ankle monitor, too, that was supposed to be on before the crime even occurred because she had a warrant out. So, yeah, she was already in some stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, so this just kind of topped it off. Yeah.
My
So,
goodness.
yeah, she's going to be in jail forever. Bond set at $2 million. She's not getting out of there.
She's not. Okay, so, but do we have a timeline on when the court case is going to happen? Like, where are we with the case right now?
It already happened. Done. Final. Yeah.
Oh,
they
so
had
she's
all
been
the evidence
convicted
they
and everything's
needed.
done?
Yeah, and I mean,
Okay.
she even said to the police, like, there's a couple different statements she said besides, like, you're going to have fun trying to find all the organs, but she
Yeah, do we have any? What did this woman do other than be a crazy murderess?
I think she was just
Like, was she a butcher?
young bum. Just 25, not doing much in life.
Wow.
In Green Bay, Wisconsin. There's something about Wisconsin with like the serial killers dismembering, though.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. Like, okay, I mean, I grew up on a farm. We hunted. I dressed animals, right?
Yeah.
Like, doing all of this with a bread knife strikes me as it took an extraordinary amount of work.
Yeah.
And time.
She went out of her way to say
Like,
she enjoyed it. Like,
even
and
messed
enjoyed
up.
herself. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but they're not seeking the death penalty, or are they?
There's been no note of that. No.
Wow.
Just she's stuck in jail forever.
I mean, you know, I'm of the view with this kind of thing, if you have them dead to rights, just like Chuck is, just let's get it over with. Let's get rid of them, execute them, move on. I hate the super lengthy process for that. I think it should be a clear standard. Like if there's no doubt, zero doubt at all.
Well, what is the point of saying somebody is a danger to society and they can't be living in society? Prison's its own society as well. Why should they be allowed to stay there?
And it costs a fortune.
Yeah, like they're waste of space.
Yeah.
Waste of space.
Wow.
Waste of space. At least she'll like her chains in prison, though, being all chained up. I'm sure she's enjoying it.
I mean, unfortunately, like they probably are bread knives somewhere in a prison.
Oh my God, yeah, yeah. Bread knives, meth, and chains.
Wow.
So Taylor could be thriving right now, guys, but
instead she, okay. That's, you know what I liked about history when they've had these cases is they gave them great nicknames.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we need to come up with a nickname for these killers.
With her last name, Taylor Shabusiness. Shabusiness. Like,
no, that's what I'm saying.
She's
like,
asking for what? Like, we have to.
someone
They
more
have to.
creative than me needs to come up with
Yeah.
a good moniker for this one.
Yeah.
I see. I'm bad at this. I'm sitting here. I'm like, the murderous Shabusiness, but that's not.
Taking care of Shabusiness? No.
Well, that's. I mean. Wait. Okay. But there was something. Murder Inc. was a thing back in the day, right?
Yeah.
So like, she's in the murder shabiz.
That's a good one.
All right.
She's in the murder shabiz.
All right. Well, we got anything else on Bee's Corner today?
No, that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
But that was a good one, though.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Something about Wisconsin and serial killers, man. I don't know.
But it is very cold and dark in the winter.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up there and, like, I did okay. I was fine.
I don't know, but like I feel like this is a thing. Like Fargo didn't come out of nowhere.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us once again. As always, we love having you as part of our program. If you are not, I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're listening to the podcast, you're already subscribed, you're downloaded. But send this to a friend. We do not have the same subscription model that a lot of people are out there doing. We're not trying to sell you a bunch of merch. We really just depend on our listeners on all our platforms. So if you can send this to a few of your friends and help make sure you're liking all of those new podcasts when they come out, that makes a huge difference for us here, for Chuck, for Brendan, for all of our crew here today. Thank you so much. And Breaking Battlegrounds will be back next week.